This is insane HOA madness. Let me set the scene fast. I limped out to my driveway with a coffee mug in one hand and my phone in the other, still wearing the same polo shirt I slept in because bending down to change clothes felt like surgery all over again, and Janice Harris was already standing next to my truck with her finger aimed at the permit decal on my W in shield like she was about to cast a spell. "You are not allowed to rewrite the rules," she snapped, her voice so sharp it could have peeled the paint off the bumper. I blinked at her, still trying to wake up, and said, "What rule did I rewrite?" She jabbed at my permit decal and screamed that it was expired because she said it looked expired. Her proof was that the color was wrong, which made no sense because the decal was the same blue sticker everyone else had, the same one I picked up from the management office 3 weeks ago when I moved into Canyon Springs, and the expiration date printed on it in tiny letters said it was good until next January. "I am the safety committee chair," Janice said, "and I know an expired decal when I see one. I work as a plumber, which means I spend half my life dealing with people who think confidence is the same thing as expertise, so I recognized the tone immediately. She was not asking a question. She was delivering a verdict. I said, "The decal is current. I have the receipt in my glove box if you want to see it." Janice shook her head so hard her lanyard swung like a pendulum. "Receipts do not prove compliance. The decal proves compliance, and that decal is expired." Behind her, a flatbed tow truck rolled into view at the end of the block, moving slowly like a shark testing the water. The driver had one elbow out the window and a phone pressed to his ear, and he was looking directly at my house. I felt my stomach drop. I said, "Did you call a tow truck?" Janice smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made you want to check if your wallet was still in your pocket. I notified the approved vendor that there was a violation vehicle in Canyon Springs that needed immediate removal. "I am standing right here," I said. "This is my truck. I live here." She pulled a clipboard out of her bag, the kind with color-coded sticky notes labeled by dates clipped to the top, and flipped through the pages like she was about to read me my rights. "You will pay the fee, then you will pay the fee about the fee," she said, her voice flat and rehearsed like she had been practicing it in the mirror. I stared at her. What does that even mean? "It means the tow fee, the storage fee, the release fee, and the administrative processing fee for the violation that triggered the tow." She tapped the clipboard with one finger. "All of it is in the rules. All of it is enforceable." The tow truck pulled up to the curb in front of my house and stopped. The driver climbed out, a guy in his 40s with grease stains on his jeans and a look on his face that said he did not care who was right as long as someone paid him. He walked over to Janice and they had a quick conversation I could not hear, but I saw him nod and then look at my truck like he was measuring it for a casket. I took a step forward, ignoring the pain shooting through my hip, and said, "I am not letting you tow my truck." Janice turned to face me, her clipboard held up like a shield. "You do not have a choice. The HOA has the authority to remove any vehicle that is not in compliance with parking regulations, and your vehicle is not in compliance." I said, "The decal is current. You are lying." Her face went red. "I will make an example out of you so everyone learns," she said, her voice rising to a shout. "This neighborhood has rules, and if you cannot follow them, you do not belong here." The tow driver walked past me without making eye contact and started circling my truck, checking the wheels and the hitch. I could hear the chain rattling on the bed of his flatbed, a low metallic scrape that made my teeth hurt. "I need to see your authorization," I said to Janice. "Show me the HOA board approval for this tow." She waved the clipboard at me. "This is my authorization. I am the safety committee chair. I do not need board approval to enforce safety violations." That was when I realized she was making it up as she went along. Canyon Springs HOA is one of those communities where certain homes get special treatment and everyone knows it. The kind of place where the board president lives in the biggest house on the cul-de-sac and never gets a fine, where the landscaping committee chair parks an RV in his driveway for 6 months and nobody says a word, and where people like Janice get to play cop because nobody wants to deal with the paperwork it would take to stop her. I said, "I want to file a formal dispute." Janice laughed. You can dispute it after the vehicle is towed. That is the process. The tow driver pulled a laminated card out of his pocket and held it up for me to see. Some kind of tow authorization placard with Canyon Springs HOA printed at the top in bold letters and a bunch of legal text I could not read from where I was standing. No signatures, no dates, just a generic threat wrapped in official-looking formatting. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The driver saw the camera and hesitated, which gave me about 3 seconds to think. I said, I am calling the management office. Right now. Janice stepped between me and the driver. The management office closes in 40 minutes, she said, and they will not take your call without an appointment. I looked at my phone. It was already past 4 in the afternoon. I had been inside all day recovering from hip surgery, the kind of injury that makes every step feel like you are walking on broken glass, and the HOA was exploiting my limited mobility like it was a strategy. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit the like button and subscribe, because this is just the beginning. I dialed the management office anyway. The phone rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I hung up and tried again. Same result. Janice was watching me with her arms crossed, clipboard tucked under one elbow. You are wasting time, she said. The truck is going to the impound lot, and you are going to pay every fee on the invoice. The tow driver walked around to the back of my truck and started lowering the wheel lift. I heard the hydraulic whine and felt my chest tighten. I had one shot to stop this, and I was running out of time. I said, I have proof that the decal is current. Janice rolled her eyes. Proof is not relevant. What is relevant is that I observed a violation and I reported it to the approved vendor. The driver hooked the lift arms under my rear axle and started winching it up. The chain went taut with a sharp metallic snap, and my truck tilted backward. I said, stop. I am filing a formal complaint with the board. Janice stepped closer, her face inches from mine. You can file all the complaints you want. The truck is leaving. That was when I saw the mail carrier turning the corner at the end of the block. He was driving one of those white USPS vans, the kind with the sliding door and the steering wheel on the wrong side, and he was trying to navigate around a row of orange cones Janice had set up in the street earlier that morning. The cones were blocking half the lane, forcing him to slow down and angle around them, and he looked annoyed. I yelled, "Hey, can you be a witness here?" The mail carrier stopped the van and leaned out the window. Witness to what? I pointed at my truck. The HOA is trying to tow my vehicle without proper authorization, and I need someone to confirm what is happening. Janice whipped around and shouted, "You do not need to get involved in this. This is an HOA matter." The mail carrier looked at her, then at me, then at the tow truck with my vehicle halfway off the ground. He said, "I am just here to deliver mail, man. I do not want any part of this." Janice walked toward the van, waving her clipboard. "You need to move. You are blocking the tow operation." The mail carrier stared at her. "I am blocking the tow operation? Lady, you put cones in the middle of the street. I am just trying to do my job." Janice pointed at the cones. "Those are safety markers. They are there to protect residents." The mail carrier shook his head and drove around the cones, pulling away without another word. I watched him disappear down the block and felt my last hope of an easy witness slip away. The tow driver finished raising the lift and locked it into place. He walked around to the front of my truck and started inspecting the hitch. I said, "I am not signing anything. I am not agreeing to this tow." Janice pulled a pen out of her blazer pocket and clicked it twice. "You do not have to agree. The authorization is already filed." I looked at her clipboard and saw a printout with my address at the top and a list of violations written in a tone that was obviously Janice's voice. Expired decal, non-compliant vehicle, immediate removal required. It was dated today, but the timestamp said 8 in the morning, which was impossible because I had been home all morning and nobody had inspected my truck until Janice showed up 20 minutes ago. I said, "That log entry is fake. You wrote that after you called the tow truck." Janice smiled again. "Prove it." The driver climbed into the cab of the flatbed and started the engine. I could feel the vibration through the pavement, a low rumble that made my hip ache even worse. I pulled out my phone again and opened the voice recorder app. I said, for the record, Janice Harris, the Canyon Springs HOA Safety Committee Chair, is authorizing the tow of my vehicle based on a complaint log entry that is dated 8 in the morning, even though she did not inspect my vehicle until 4 in the afternoon. The decal on my windshield is current and valid, and I have the receipt to prove it. Janice stepped toward me, her face twisted with rage. You are not allowed to record me without my consent. I kept the phone pointed at her. Maryland is a two-party consent state for private conversations, but this is happening on a public street, and you are acting in your official capacity as an HOA representative. I am allowed to record this. She looked at the driver and shouted, just take it. Take it now. The driver put the truck in gear and started rolling forward. My truck, still hooked to the lift, jerked and swayed as the flatbed pulled away from the curb. I ran after the truck, my hips screaming with every step, and shouted, where are you taking it? The driver leaned out the window and yelled back, impound lot on Route 40. You can pick it up after you pay the fees. I stopped in the middle of the street, breathing hard, and watched the truck disappear around the corner. Janice walked past me, clipboard tucked under her arm, and said, I will make an example out of you so everyone learns. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the wind whip through my hair and the pain radiate down my leg, and then I pulled out my phone and called my friend Marcus. He is a local paralegal, the kind of guy who knows every loophole and every filing deadline, and he has helped me out of tight spots before. He answered on the second ring. What happened? I said, the HOA just towed my truck. I need your help. Marcus sighed. Tell me everything. I told him about the permit decal, the fake log entry, the tow authorization, the timestamp that did not match, and the way Janice had refused to let me dispute anything before the truck was gone. I told him about the mail carrier who did not want to get involved, and the way the driver had ignored me when I asked for documentation. Marcus said, do you have any proof that the decal is current? I said, I have the receipt from the management office. It is in my glove box, which is now on a tow truck heading to Route 40. Marcus was quiet for a second. Okay. Do you have photos of the decal? I scrolled through my phone and found a picture I had taken 3 weeks ago when I first stuck the decal to the windshield. I texted it to Marcus. He said, this is good. The date on the sticker is visible. Do you have anything else? I thought about it. I said, I have the recording I just made. Janice admitted that the log entry was filed at 8 in the morning, but she did not inspect my truck until 4. Marcus said, that is even better. Send me the audio file. I am going to draft a dispute packet for you, and we are going to deliver it to the management office in person before they close. I looked at my watch. It was already 4:30. I said they close at 5. I do not think I can make it in time. Marcus said, where are you right now? I said, standing in the middle of my street. The truck is gone. Marcus said, get in your car and drive to the office. I will meet you there in 20 minutes with the packet. We are going to file this thing before they lock the doors, and we are going to make sure every word of it goes on the record. I limped back to my driveway and climbed into my sedan, the backup car I keep for trips to the hardware store. My hip was on fire, but I did not care. I had one shot to deliver the dispute packet in person before the management office closed, and I was not going to let Janice win because of a deadline. I drove across town with my hands tight on the wheel, weaving through traffic and hitting every red light like the universe was trying to slow me down. The management office was in a strip mall next to a dry cleaner and a nail salon, one of those generic office suites with mirrored windows and a faded sign that said Canyon Springs Community Management. I pulled into the parking lot at 4:48. Marcus was already there, standing next to his car with a folder in his hands. He waved me over. I climbed out and he handed me the folder. Inside was a 3-page dispute letter, printed on clean white paper with bullet points and timestamps, and a copy of the receipt for my permit decal. There was also a printout of the photo I had sent him, with the expiration date circled in red. Marcus said, this is everything you need. The letter states that the tow was unauthorized, that the log entry is fraudulent, and that you have documented proof of compliance. It requests an immediate reversal of the tow and a refund of all associated fees. I said, what if they do not read it? Marcus said, they have to read it. This is a formal dispute filed under the HOA bylaws, and they are legally required to respond within 10 business days. If they ignore it, we file a complaint with the state HOA Oversight Board and we copy the Attorney General. I nodded. Let's do this. We walked into the office together. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a chain, looked up from her computer and said, "We are closing in 10 minutes. I said, I need to file a formal dispute with the board. She sighed and pushed a clipboard across the desk. Fill out the form and leave it in the box. We will get to it when we can. I said, no, I need to file this in person, and I need a receipt with a timestamp. The receptionist looked at Marcus, then at me, then at the folder in my hands. She said, what is this about? I said the HOA Safety Committee chair authorized an illegal tow of my vehicle based on a fraudulent log entry, and I have proof that the permit decal was current at the time of the tow. This dispute packet includes the receipt, the photo, and a recorded statement from the chair that contradicts the timestamp on her own complaint. The receptionist stared at the folder like it might explode. She said, I am going to need to get the manager. She picked up the phone and made a call. A minute later, a man in a polo shirt with a Canyon Springs logo on the chest walked out of the back office. He looked at me and said, what is going on? I handed him the folder. I said, Janice Harris towed my truck without proper authorization. This packet proves that the decal was current and that the log entry she filed is backdated and fraudulent. I am requesting an immediate reversal of the tow and a full refund of all fees. The manager flipped through the pages, his face getting tighter with every line he read. He said, where is the vehicle now? I said, Route 40 impound lot. The driver took it about an hour ago. The manager looked at Marcus. Who are you? Marcus said, I am his paralegal. I prepared the dispute packet and I am here to make sure it gets filed properly. The manager closed the folder and handed it back to the receptionist. He said, log this as received at 4:53. I will review it tomorrow morning and contact the board. I said, tomorrow is not good enough. I need my truck back tonight. The manager shook his head. The impound lot does not release vehicles after hours. You will have to wait until tomorrow. I said, the tow was illegal. You have the proof right there in your hands. The manager said, I understand your frustration, but I cannot authorize a release without board approval. That is the policy. Marcus stepped forward. He said if the HOA does not reverse this tow by tomorrow morning, we are filing a complaint with the Maryland Homeowners Association Oversight Unit, and we are requesting a formal investigation into the Safety Committee's enforcement practices. We are also going to request copies of all tow authorizations filed in the past 12 months to see if there is a pattern of selective enforcement. The manager's face went pale. He said, let me make some calls. He walked back into the office and closed the door. Marcus and I stood in the lobby, watching the clock tick past 5. The receptionist locked the front door and turned off the lights in the waiting area, but she left the desk lamp on so we could see. At 5:15, the manager came back out. He said, I spoke to the board president and the HOA attorney. They agree that the tow should not have been authorized without a formal board vote, and they are directing the management company to reverse the charges and retrieve the vehicle. I said, what about Janice? The manager said, the attorney is recommending a policy clarification to prevent future incidents like this. The board will address it at the next meeting. Marcus said, we want that policy clarification in writing, and we want a copy of the minutes from that meeting. The manager nodded. I will make sure you get both. I took the folder back from the receptionist and said, I also want a formal apology from Janice Harris. The manager said, that is not something I can guarantee, but I will pass along your request. We walked out of the office and I felt the tension drain out of my shoulders. Marcus clapped me on the back and said, you did good. That was a clean win. I said, it does not feel clean. It feels like I just spent 2 hours fighting for something I should not have had to fight for in the first place. Marcus said, that is HOA life, man. You have to fight for every inch, or they will take everything. I drove home and collapsed on the couch, my hip throbbing and my head spinning. I thought about calling the impound lot to check on my truck, but I was too exhausted to deal with it. I would pick it up in the morning after the fees were cleared. The next day, I got a call from the tow company. The dispatcher said the charges had been reversed and my truck was ready for pickup. I drove to the lot and found my vehicle parked in the back corner, covered in dust and bird droppings, but otherwise intact. The guy at the desk handed me the keys without a word, and I drove home. That afternoon, Marcus called me with an update. He said, I got a copy of the board meeting minutes from last night. They held an emergency session after you filed the dispute. I said, what did they decide? Marcus said, the attorney forced a reversal to reduce liability. They voted to void the tow authorization and issue a formal notice to Janice that she does not have unilateral authority to call tow trucks. They also clarified the enforcement policy to require board approval for any vehicle removal. I said, did they mention the fake log entry? Marcus said they danced around it. The minutes say that the complaint was filed in error due to a miscommunication, but they did not use the word fraud. That is, lawyer speak, for we know she lied, but we are not going to admit it on the record. I said, what about Janice? Marcus said her selective enforcement tactics are now documented in the minutes. The board president made a point of saying that all enforcement actions have to be applied evenly across the community, which means Janice cannot target you anymore without targeting everyone else. I felt a slow smile spread across my face. I said, so she lost her favorite weapon. Marcus said, exactly. The policy clarification destroys her favorite tactic. She can still file complaints, but she cannot bypass the board and call a tow truck on her own authority. That weekend, I was sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee when I saw Janice walking down the street with her clipboard. She was wearing the same gray blazer and the same lanyard, but her expression was different. She looked like someone who had just been told that the rules she thought she wrote were actually written by someone else. She walked past my house without making eye contact, and I raised my coffee mug in a mock salute. She ignored me and kept walking. A few days later, Marcus sent me another update. He said, I did some digging into the tow dispatch logs and call recordings. Janice called the tow company 6 times in the past 3 months, and every single call was for a vehicle in your section of the neighborhood. None of the other sections got towed once. I said, that is selective enforcement. Marcus said that is a pattern. And the best part is, the tow company kept recordings of all the calls because they have to for liability reasons. In one of the recordings, Janice explicitly says that she wants to make an example out of someone so everyone learns. Sound familiar? I laughed. That is her catchphrase. Marcus said it is also evidence of intent. If the board ever tries to defend her actions, we can play that recording in front of the whole community and show them exactly what she was doing. The following week, the Canyon Springs HOA held its monthly board meeting. Marcus and I showed up with a printed copy of the dispute packet, the tow dispatch logs, and a transcript of the recorded call where Janice threatened to make an example out of me. The meeting was held in the community center, a beige building with folding chairs and a podium that looked like it had been stolen from a high school auditorium. About 20 residents were there, most of them retirees who had nothing better to do on a Tuesday night. Janice sat in the front row with her clipboard, looking smug. The board president, a man in his 60s with a gray beard and a tired expression, called the meeting to order and asked if there was any new business. Marcus stood up and said, I would like to address the board about the unauthorized tow of my client's vehicle and the enforcement practices of the safety committee chair. The board president sighed. Go ahead. Marcus walked to the front of the room and handed out copies of the dispute packet to each board member. He said, on the afternoon of the incident, Janice Harris authorized the tow of a compliant vehicle based on a fraudulent log entry. The entry was time-stamped at 8 in the morning, but the inspection did not occur until 4 in the afternoon. The vehicle had a current permit decal, which my client can prove with a receipt and a photograph. The tow was reversed by the HOA attorney due to liability concerns, but the underlying issue has not been addressed. Janice stood up and said, "That is not accurate. I observed a violation, and I reported it according to protocol." Marcus said, "The protocol requires board approval for vehicle removal. You bypassed that requirement and called the tow company directly. You also filed a complaint log entry with a false timestamp to make it appear that the violation was observed earlier in the day." Janice's face turned red. "I did not falsify anything. The entry was filed when I observed the violation." Marcus pulled out his phone and played the recording I had made on the street. Janice's voice came through the speaker, clear and loud. "You will pay the fee. Then you will pay the fee about the fee." The room went silent. One of the board members leaned forward and said, "Did you really say that?" Janice stammered, "That was taken out of context." Marcus said, "The context is that you threatened my client with multiple fees for a violation that did not exist. You also made a statement on a recorded call to the tow company that you wanted to make an example out of someone so everyone learns. That is selective enforcement, and it is documented in the dispatch logs." The board president held up a hand. "Janice, sit down. We need to discuss this in executive session." Janice sat down, her face pale and her hands shaking. The board president called a recess, and the members filed into a back room. Marcus and I waited in the main room while the other residents whispered to each other. One woman leaned over and said, "I have been saying for years that Janice targets certain people. Nobody believed me." Another man said, "She tried to fine me for parking in my own driveway last year. I had to fight it for 3 months." After 20 minutes, the board came back out. The president said, "The board has reviewed the evidence, and we have decided to issue a formal reprimand to the safety committee chair for failing to follow proper enforcement procedures. We are also implementing a new policy that requires all vehicle removal requests to be approved by the full board before any action is taken. This policy will be applied evenly across the community, and any future violations of this procedure will result in removal from the committee." Janice stood up and said, "This is ridiculous. I was doing my job." The president said, "Your job is to report violations, not to authorize tows. You overstepped your authority, and it created a liability issue for the HOA. The attorney made it clear that if we do not correct this, we could face legal action from other residents who have been subjected to similar treatment." Janice grabbed her clipboard and stormed out of the room. The door slammed behind her, and the board president continued with the rest of the meeting like nothing had happened. Afterward, Marcus and I walked to the parking lot. He said, "That went better than I expected." I said, "She is not going to stop. She is going to find another way to come after me." Marcus said, "Maybe. But now she has to do it by the book, and the book says she has to get board approval for everything. That is going to slow her down." Over the next few weeks, I kept an eye on the neighborhood Facebook group and the HOA bulletin board. Janice posted a few complaints about other residents, but none of them mentioned me. The tow truck did not come back. Then, about a month later, I got a call from Marcus. He said, "You are not going to believe this." I said, "What happened?" Marcus said, "I was going through the old meeting minutes for a different case, and I found something interesting. The minutes from the emergency board session where they reversed your tow, they were edited after the meeting." I said, "What do you mean edited?" Marcus said, "Someone went into the file and changed the wording. The original version said that Janice had engaged in selective enforcement and that the board was concerned about a pattern of abuse. The new version says that the tow was reversed due to a procedural error and that no further action was necessary." I said, "How did you find the original?" Marcus said, "The management company keeps backup files for every meeting. I requested a copy of the backup and compared it to the published version. They are completely different." I felt my stomach twist. I said, "Who changed it?" Marcus said, "The file metadata shows that it was edited by someone at the management office, but there is no name attached. My guess is that Janice pressured them to soften the language so it would not look as bad on the record. I said, "Can we use this?" Marcus said, "Absolutely. This is proof that the HOA is covering up her misconduct. We can bring it to the next board meeting and demand that they restore the original minutes." 2 weeks later, we did exactly that. Marcus presented the original file and the edited file side by side, and the board president looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He apologized and said that the original minutes would be restored to the record. Janice was not at that meeting. Rumor had it that she had stepped down from the safety committee after the reprimand, but nobody knew for sure. A few months after that, the tow company that Janice had been using lost its contract with Canyon Springs. The board president announced at a meeting that they were switching to a new vendor after receiving multiple complaints about predatory practices and unauthorized tows. He did not mention Janice by name, but everyone in the room knew what he was talking about. The new vendor had a strict policy, no tows without written authorization from the board president, and all fees had to be disclosed up front. It was not perfect, but it was a huge improvement. I ran into Janice one more time after all of this. She was at the grocery store, standing in the checkout line with a cart full of frozen dinners and bottled water. I walked past her and she looked at me, her face tight and angry, but she did not say anything. I kept walking. I did not need to say anything either. The policy clarification that destroyed her favorite tactic was still in place, and her selective enforcement was now documented in the minutes. She could not touch me anymore, and she knew it. The tow company refunded the charges, voided the tow, and canceled the HOA contract after seeing the evidence packet. The board forced a reversal to reduce liability, and Janice's own selective enforcement got documented in the minutes. The funny part? Janice insisted on a deadline, and the timestamp proved she lied. That boomerang line about paying the fee about the fee? It turned into the exact reason the attorney told the board to back off, because it showed intent to harass. I still live in Canyon Springs. My hip healed up, I went back to work, and I keep my permit decal stuck to the windshield where everyone can see it. Every time I walk past that spot in the driveway where Janice stood and screamed at me, I smile a little. Because in the end, you really are not allowed to rewrite the rules, and if you try, the rules will rewrite you. Thanks for watching, and I appreciate you being here.